Welcome to the Refuse Ordinary podcast. I'm your host, Tamara, and I'm so glad you've decided to join us on this journey of discovering who God is and who we are in Him. We are so excited to share with you today another class from our full-time School of Transformation. Today's topic is called Enduring Till the End, taught by Ryan Kelly. We hope this class brings encouragement to you in your walk with Jesus.
But enduring to the end. So today's all about gaining the right perspective to achieve overcoming to the end. So right perspective that leads to the ability to overcome and endurance. So first off, how many of you guys know we need right perspective at times? Like we need to see things clearly. Yeah. You guys need to see things clearly? Mm-hmm. What does that do for you? When you saw something one way and you see it in a different way, and you get a right, truthful perspective on that situation, what does that do for you?
It does a lot. It does confidence and mind-blowing.
Yeah. Perspective. We need perspective. You know, we all have our own perspective on things, on reality, on life, on situations, on people, on circumstances. And so when we gain right perspective, it helps us to actually tackle it in a different way, to overcome, to approach it differently, maybe to maybe the way that you communicate changes, the way that your attitude changes, the way that your mood, your approach changes with the right perspective. And so we're talking about enduring to the end. Not always a fun phrase, but life is very much endurance. Life is very much finishing. Life is very, very much finishing what you started. There's a beginning, there's an end. And that's true of us, isn't it? That's true of life. There's a beginning and there's an end to life. And there's a beginning and end to a lot of things that we start and finish, seasons of your life. And so, but endurance is always a common theme throughout. And so how do you actually endure and overcome to the end? And we'll talk about how that's important in Christianity, and maybe we'll define a little bit, but you know, might surprise you. Maybe you've heard this before, maybe you haven't. But Jesus says more times, and it's stated more times in the Bible, that he who overcomes to the end is saved than it does to just say, if you confess and believe with your mouth, then you're saved. So there's more biblical evidence that salvation is a product of endurance and overcoming, more so than it is just to declare with your mouth. Because anybody can just say something with your mouth. You know, I can declare all day, I can sing songs, I can write it down, I can paint it on my body if I wanted, my belief, but it's actually more visible when you live it out and you overcome. And so, don't know why God set it up this way. His plan, not my plan, His plan. So if I'm on His page, I have to be willing to fit my perspective and my thinking to His. And so if He cares about endurance and He cares about overcoming to the end, those who overcome, basically those who don't give way, those who don't stray, those who stay steadfast, who stay planted in the truth, your ability to stay planted in the truth is what will result in salvation. And when you think about it that way, it makes more sense, huh? So overcoming means staying planted, staying rooted, staying grounded. When you can stay grounded in something that's truth, and as Christians, our viewpoint is Jesus is truth. If we can stay planted in Him, then that is our ability to overcome. That is overcoming, remaining steadfast in Him, remaining steadfast in the truth. And that makes sense when you think about salvation. Oh, my ability to stay and remain in Jesus actually brings about salvation. Well, that should be a light bulb. Ding, 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 ding. You know, it's okay. That's so right. Because why? On the other hand, it's when you flip it over and say, oh, my ability to not remain in Jesus, my ability to just kind of come and go as I choose, as I please, what feels right in the moment, should that lead to salvation? No. You know, it's like James talks about double-mindedness, and the Bible and the disciples and the apostles, they talk about what happens when you don't remain in the truth. And that's why so many of these New Testament letters to churches are correction. Like Johnny brought this morning, Corinthians, it's a letter of correction. It's like, let's get right perspective going so that you can come back to the truth and remain in the truth. Because it's so easy to get off. So enduring to the end, right perspective to achieve this, and we'll get to kind of 6 main points that help us. If we can kind of accept these 6 points, it'll actually help us to overcome. And before we get to those points, we're going to look at, how do we define endurance? What does that actually mean? And so if we look at a dictionary definition, they would say the fact or power of enduring an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. That's why I bold italicized that. Without giving way. So your ability to endure something unpleasant. I think that's why the topic of endurance is so difficult to talk about, because it does typically mean then an unpleasant situation or circumstance or process. And it's, who wants to go through unpleasant trials, seasons, and you guys are in your very own things. Each of you are overcoming something right now. Yeah. I'm overcoming something right now. And the level of difficulty or level of unpleasantness is so case by case, isn't it? That's why it's why we can't compare a situation with somebody else. Someone else's pain is someone else's pain. It's real for them. Someone else's issue, problem, situation is real for them. And so, but endurance is the ability to endure those situations but without giving way. Merriam-Webster would word it this way: the ability to withstand hardship or adversity, the ability to sustain a prolonged stressful effort or activity, the act or an instance of enduring or suffering. And so again, that's why it's like we don't necessarily love talking about endurance, because that involves some sort of suffering. But when you look at the Bible, it's very clear that Christianity, your Christianity, your theology has to have room for suffering. And if your Christianity and your theology has no room for suffering, then you're missing out on the full picture of what it means to be a Christian. And there are groups of Christians that wipe this out from their thinking, because it's a God bless me club, or my life is going to be blessed forever and it's going to feel good every day, and I'm only rain that's going to fall on me is the good rain. It's the gifts from heaven. It's and that does happen, right? Like, we do see the grace of God, and we see the mercy of God, and we see the gifts of God, and we see the love of God, which looks like good things, but that's not the full picture of Christianity. Suffering has to be in our theology. And if the disciples suffered, if Jesus himself suffered on the earth, then there has to be an element of suffering. And that suffering might not look like martyrdom. It might not look like whips and stones and beatings for your faith. Your suffering might be, like in my case, part of my suffering is, hey, I choose to move away from family and home. I moved, 35-hour car ride away. It's like I've been here 15 years. So part of the suffering is I've lost relationship, or just being there, moments with my siblings and with my nieces and nephews, and my own parents. It's like that's part of our word for me, the suffering of choosing to follow Jesus, which looks like being away from them. That's been the biggest cost for me, I'd say, is leaving family behind to pursue him. And it's like, and in that, I've gained new family, I've gained friends, I've gained a relationship with God. It's like, but the suffering looks different for everybody. But we have to have room for that. I mean, suffering too, sometimes to deny the flesh hurts. That feels like suffering at times, doesn't it? Like your flesh wants this so bad.
Like when you don't have coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, no. You feel like you're suffering, but you're suffering for what? For righteousness, for a good outcome. Like you're denying the things of the flesh because there's a better outcome if you do. And it feels like suffering. You guys with me so far?
Yeah.
All right. So some synonyms for the word endurance. So some things we can help to kind of paint the picture. Abidance, continuation, durability, persistence. And those always kind of have to do with sports. You think about durability and being persistent, continuing on, fighting through. Those are all words that you could also throw in there for endurance. So, but I like abidance there, because that goes back to what I opened up with. which I didn't even have in my notes, didn't even plan. So that's the Lord, you know. It's like the ability to stay rooted, planted, to abide is the fact of endurance. Because you're not, it helps you to withstand. When you're planted in Him, you can withstand hardship and adversity. And it helps that you're not alone. Who wants to do it alone? Man, it's so much better with Him. So, a couple, 1 Corinthians would say this. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Kind of got to go back to the 1 Corinthians 9 and talk about Paul is mentioning his use of liberty and how he is really sacrificing for all Christianity. But he's saying, I will be all things to all people. And we are running a race. It's not individual. It's like we're all running a race. But who runs a race to come in second? You know, you run in a race to try to win. That's the goal. And so life, he compares it to this race, but we're all running. Let's run in a way that we'll win. And he goes into talking about beating his body in submission and his mind and these different things so that the words he preaches, he's actually living out. That's kind of the full context. But we're running this race, and so we have to do this with endurance. And if we give up short, then we aren't giving endurance its full effect. And so how do we do this in such a way that we'll win? Well, through endurance. Through endurance. That's how we're going to do this thing. That's how we're going to run. By being persistent, by being planted, by continuing on. That's how we're going to do this thing to the end. Because, and I'm jumping the gun here, 6 points we're going to get to in a minute. A couple things. Endurance from a kind of world a viewpoint. Some examples in the world of endurance and the reward for that endurance. So in the Marines, you guys have heard of the thing called the Crucible? Yep. So my brother was in the Marines for 4 years, right out of high school. And during boot camp, it kind of ends with this, what they call a crucible. And I'll define it for you guys. It's this final challenge before earning the title of United States Marine. And the event is called the Crucible. It's a 54-hour event that tests your physical stamina, your mental toughness, your ability to think critically while under multiple levels of stress, including hunger, sleep deprivation, and physical exhaustion. Like they push you to your limits, you know. And it's a test in all areas, from physical, mental. Kind of, yeah.
Sounds like LOM.
That might have been your crucible, huh? And you made it. And what was the reward for enduring? What was the reward for enduring?
15 months of sobriety.
Okay.
Good job.
Which in itself is an amazing thing. Mm-hmm. I think your reward was way more than just that, but that's part of it. And so for the Marines, you know, why go through all this? Why go through depriving your body of sleep? Why go through these tests of physical exhaustion and a mental ability, you know? And they face these obstacles that requires teamwork. But why do all this? Why? So that they can earn the title of what? Marine. That's the reward. I'm crowned a Marine. They're part of this brotherhood, you know, and that's my brother would describe it as, you know, it's a brotherhood. You earned this. You did it together, and you earned this title, Marine. So they're willing to do this. They're willing to put the effort in. They're willing to go through all these challenges so that they'll earn the reward of being crowned a Marine. Another example is Mr. Beast. You guys ever heard of him on YouTube?
I like him.
Yeah, he's a philanthropist. He's a young guy. He makes, well, I'll tell you what he does. His real name is Jimmy Donaldson, but he's better known as Mr. Beast. So he's an American YouTube personality. He's a philanthropist. He has been credited with pioneering a genre of YouTube videos that centers on expensive stunts. His main channel, which is called Mr. Beast, is the 5th most subscribed on all of YouTube. So he's kind of one of the original channels, which is why he has so many followers, which means he also makes millions of dollars a month off having a YouTube channel, which is what enables him to be able to do these elaborate schemes and stunts but basically, it's really neat. Like, he's got so many different ones. I couldn't describe them all. But, for example, total strangers. What's that?
I said, did you see the car lot one?
Yeah, so that's a good one. He goes and he buys a whole used car lot dealership. and then he gives cars away for free to total strangers. He buys all the cars, gives them away. He's like, how much can you afford? How much you got in your wallet? $1. Okay, sold. $1. You know, giving cars away, empties the whole dealership, and gives them all away. You know, it's like things like that. Or he has challenges, extreme hide-and-seek challenges in like a football stadium. And whoever the last person to win gets $1 million, like free, $1 million cash. There's some that are, there's like, he'll bring in like $1 million in $1 bills in this huge cube, and it's 10 random strangers that have been invited to do this. And it's like, you put your hand on the cube, the last person to take their hand off keeps the money. And so they'll last a couple days. They each have to have someone come in and feed them, or like they have to use the bathroom, your hand stays on that thing. You know, it's like they come and put a towel around you. It's like, if you want this, if you're willing to endure, if you're willing to suffer, then you get this reward. You know, same with these expensive cars. He does all these elaborate things, but there's always this physical challenge. There's this element of something you have to overcome in order to earn that reward. And people do it, why? Well, because it's millions of dollars, or a free airplane, or it's like, you know, it's these things that people want. But in some regard, there's this reward for their suffering, their ability to endure, which is money, cars, things, possessions, whatever. And so, but his channel exists to bless people, to give things away. And I'm sure there's a bit of, you know, it's kind of family and friend operated. They have since high school. They've all been together, and they've done this thing together for many years now. It's kind of interesting. That's what he does. But the bottom line, there's a reward for the suffering, a reward for the challenge, a reward for the endurance. So enduring is a big deal. You know, do we often think about there being a reward for your endurance in Christianity? Or is it like, I must now suffer for the rest of my life? And sometimes there is that communication. And we can get trapped in that perspective where it's like, I guess I'm just going to have to be a suffering Christian for the rest of my life. Just going to be hardship every day from here on out. Never going to be fun. You guys ever feel that way? You ever have those thoughts go through your brain? We do. And we think endurance is just, okay, I have to grit through it now. I got to just put my boots on and just one day at a time, one foot for the next. And sometimes it is that way, but the reality too that helps us is why? Why do that? Why go one day at a time? Why put your boots on? Why endure? Well, there's a reward. There's a reward in the end, isn't there? And we have to, we see this in the world. We see this through silly little obstacles like Mr. Beast or the Marines. You get the reward of being crowned a Marine, or a Navy SEAL, or Special Force, all those things. But when it comes to Christianity, why would we expect there to be no endurance? It's just like a free reward. God loves us. Here's your reward. Enter in. It's like he does that. He's a good God. He can decide to do that if he wants to. And he blesses us beyond all that we could ever think or imagine. But the fact is there's a reward for the endurance. We're not just enduring for no reason. We're not just suffering for no reason. We're actually denying ourselves. We're denying our flesh. We're leaving homes, we're leaving families, we're doing these things, we're following after Jesus for a reason. There's a reward in it. What is it? You got to get with them. Got to find out. What's the reward? Well, part of the reward is salvation, which is the biggest reward on the line, by the way, is salvation. So endurance is a big deal, not just in the world, but in Christianity. And like I said earlier, the Bible says, and don't just quote me on it, go find out for yourself too, is a lot of times, it's stated, half of the times it's stated comes in Revelation and the letters to the churches about overcoming to the end. But that's still the words of Jesus. And he's still writing to church. He's still writing to people that have faith in him or claiming to have faith in him. But it says more times that to inherit salvation, you have to endure to the end to receive it. And so that has to also fit into our theology. If Jesus said it that many times, then if you're looking at the Bible in context, you can't just dismiss those verses that talk about overcoming. And just say, yeah, but the other verse, I like this one better because it says if I just say it with my mouth, then I have salvation. It's like, yeah, that does sound better. It really does. I'm a Christian, therefore I'm a Christian. It's like, okay, well, what do you do with these verses? Overcoming. And so I think it's also part of just really God's plan, if you think about it. It's those moments of testing, of trial, of challenge that actually prove what your faith is. And so if we were to remove any obstacle, any challenge, then we wouldn't really know what our genuine faith was. And so like we said, you guys are each going through something. And you probably can, as we're talking, you're probably thinking about things, your challenges right now, the things you just opened up about Mike earlier, you know? It's like without that challenge, if that was totally removed, would you confidently know where your position with Jesus is?
No.
Would you know where your trust in Jesus was? Not necessarily. Like, you probably still have your idea. You'd still probably be convinced of some things. But then when those challenges come, seen or unseen, welcome or unwelcome, they're there. It's like that is the ability to actually know, to find out where your trust in Jesus really is. And so, do we like the challenge? Not necessarily. Sucks at times, doesn't it? But the fruit of that challenge is the opportunity to actually find out what you believe.
No.
And it actually presents itself as, hey, maybe your attitude isn't great at first, but does your perspective change? Does it shift to see, okay, this is an opportunity to overcome, to endure, to find out what I actually believe? Because isn't it worth finding out what you believe?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I want to pray and say, God, give me more challenges in my life, right? Yeah. Should we all get on our knees and say, God, please, give me more obstacles, Lord. Please. I'm not sure where my faith and trust is today, so can you help me by bringing something into my life that's going to show me? I'd rather just learn from Steve and Vicky, I'd rather just see their challenges or your challenges. I don't want my own. It's like, but Steve was very vocal about his house burning down and his initial reaction to that, knowing that, hey, and he's been very honest about his life where he's struggled with that at times when he lost his equity and the houses and everything, and he struggled. Like his identity crisis, who am I? Where are we? I thought you were good. Shaking his fist, those moments. You probably have those in your life. I thought you were good. What happened? What's this all about? I don't understand. And then his house burns down and realized he came to a point of, well, that wasn't my house anyways. This was your house. And for him, that was evidence of this challenge. I know where I'm rooted. I know where I'm planted. And so, I don't necessarily believe that God causes every challenge or is the one who produces every challenge. Sometimes it's just a result of us living in a fallen world and people making their own choices that present challenges to us. So I don't believe that God brings every single thing that we say this is of God. I think there probably are ones that God ordains as challenges specifically from Him. But in either case, it's still an opportunity to find out where I'm at. What's my response going to be? Yeah.
Well, yeah, but doesn't He controls all things, right? He can make anything happen that He wants to.
Does He? Is He sovereign? Yes. Is He omnipotent, meaning all-powerful? Yeah. But does He control every choice you make?
No.
He doesn't. So He doesn't control everything. Yeah. So Adam and Eve fell. We live in a fallen world. All right? It wasn't God's design. We live in a world that isn't in God's design currently. And so there are things that happen that He doesn't control, and He doesn't intervene, doesn't stop it necessarily, but because He gives us free will. So I hear what you're saying, though. It's a good question. So challenge, what are we going to do with that? So endurance, we're called to endure, we're called to overcome. So that's something we have to consider. What's the reward for this endurance? If we can, a lot of times we get blindsided by the challenge, the difficulty, and we can't really see the reward, or we can't really see the end result, what's going to happen. But if we approach some of this Christianity with this understanding that, hey, there is a reward, if I can just overcome. And some days that might mean you're mustering the strength on your own. Hopefully what it means is you're relying on people around you. Hopefully what it means is you're stepping into Jesus, not away from Him. But every challenge is produce these opportunities to run from Him, to isolate, to withdraw, to hold back, or to push in, group up. We all have those responses inside of us. But if we can kind of see, man, there's actually, even if I don't see it right now, I know that my reward for enduring to the end in Christianity is I get to be with Him. I get to be with Him. And if I keep that in my mind, that might help me to then make good decisions in the moment today. I don't just have to suffer through this. I actually get something at the end as a result. In his letter to 2 Timothy, Paul says this, "For this reason," verse 10, "I endure all things for the sake of those who are chosen, so that they also may obtain the salvation which is in Christ, and with it eternal glory." The statement is trustworthy. If we died with him, we'll also live with him. If we endure, then we'll also reign with him. If we deny him, he will deny us. If we're faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. And so again, the words, "I endure," and then "if we endure." So if we endure, and again, that word endure, if we define it, all those ways we talked about, but one being planted. If we remain planted in him, then it says what? We'll reign with him. And then it's interesting that he connects then, if we deny him, we'll be denied by him. And so Jesus even says this in the Gospels, that if you confess me before men, I will confess you before my Father who is in heaven. And if we deny him before men, we'll be denied before the Father. And so it's no shock that Paul is quoting that or saying similar statements. But that thought of, if we don't remain planted, so if we deny, if we don't withstand, if we're swayed and we're pulled in a different direction of denial, then we'll be denied. That's a scary thought, isn't it? But I love that it says if we're faithless, he still remains faithful. That's who he is. He doesn't change. We may change, we may shift, we may sway, but he doesn't. And so we have one to cling to that's forever faithful, that's forever true, that's forever powerful, it's forever good. All those things that we know about him, which actually should help us then to withstand, knowing that we have one who is stable, who is reliable, who is trustworthy, who actually has good intentions for us, good thoughts about us. That's who he is. I love that. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. Oh, I love that. So 6 keys we're going to talk about. We might not spend time on every single one of these. We've got 25 minutes left or so, 20-ish. But we'll go over, at least mention them, and then we'll look at them. So if applied, then these can help us to better overcome, help us to better endure to the end, because they're vital to our ability to gain that right perspective. So the first one, I'll list them all here, and then we'll break them down a little bit. So one is certainty of storms. Right? If we understand there's a certainty of storms in our life, then we already are approaching this as knowing that storms will come. Counting the cost. Big deal to overcoming. 3, our attitude towards these things, counting the cost, certainty of storms, and the reality that, hey, I'm actually owed nothing. For our calling, what we're called into, and specifically living hope out of 1 Peter. And then 5, understanding our challenge, which is to overcome. That's the call and challenge. And then 6, practicals, is we overcome a number of ways, but practically one is putting Jesus' words into practice. And actually living them out is what actually helps us to overcome. So 6 keys that if we apply them will help us gain a better perspective in our approach to endurance and overcoming. Certainty of storms, counting the cost, our attitude, calling, our challenge, and then practical, putting his words into practice. All right, so let's look at certainty of storms for a second. John 16, Jesus says, "Do you now believe? Time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered." He's talking to his disciples, "Each to your own home. You will leave me all alone, yet I'm not alone, for my Father's with me. I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you what? You will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." So Jesus is telling them, he's telling us, hey, this is a guarantee. You will have trouble, you will have challenge, you will have difficulty. This is a certainty that we can expect, is there will be challenge. We shouldn't be shocked by this when storms arise. It's actually a part of being human, is what Jesus is saying. And no one's immune from this. Not the disciples, not the apostles, not even Jesus. His own life was filled with hardship. His own life was filled with difficulty, but yet he overcame. So in his humanity, he shows us how this is possible to do. How to approach it with the right attitude, how to approach it with the right relationship with the Father, independence and trust. He showed us how to rely on his friends who were there for him, or in some moments weren't there for him, but he showed us how, in his humanity, how to approach overcoming through difficult situations. And if he could do it, then there's no excuse that we can't do it, or that we are unable to do it. You guys with me? Mm-hmm. So we have his example, Jesus' own example, to imitate from, to learn from, to try to live out. And so, I shared a thought earlier on Christianity, but it's like I had this when I first became a Christian. It was just ignorance. It's okay, here we go. I'm a Christian, get out of jail free card was more my attitude. Get out of hell free card, Jesus is my ticket to salvation, so life's just going to be roses from here on out. It's going to be easy, it's going to be fun. And then it's like, if that's your approach to Christianity, then you get hit with one difficulty, what happens? Your whole foundation is shaken and it crumbles because there's no room for that. You're already starting Christianity with the lie, with this belief that there's never going to be difficulty. Okay? So that's not the picture. We know it's difficult. And yet, in the world, we don't usually fuss or throw a fit when things are difficult if we know there's a reward in the end. I'm going to go through all these years of school and education so that I can get the degree, so I can get the title, so that I can earn the money. It's like it's worth the effort putting into it. Or certain trades and certain skills worth the effort, or working out, not a part of my life, but why do people work out? Why do they push their body to the physical limit so they can get the reward of the effect of being in shape, of being fit, of the muscles? It's like it's worth it. So in the world, it's like we understand it's worth putting effort into. Why would Christianity be different? Why would the gospel be different? Trying to live a holy life versus an unholy life, that's going to take some effort. It's going to take some practice. So, the first thing, certainty of storms. There's going to be difficulty. And it's not just because I'm saying it, it's because Jesus said it. It's like, you're going to have it. This is going to come, and it shouldn't throw you off. But part of Christianity is that my life is no longer about me. That also has to be my theology. My life becomes about him. So what happens in these storms? Is it about him? Is it about me? There's a quote from Danielle's book, Line in the Sand. God does not promise that we will not endure hardship or that our life situations will improve drastically when we become a Christian. Jesus' only promise when it comes to hardships is that he will be with us if we want him to be, and he will make all things work together for good. And so we can take some comfort in that, even though the storm sucks, challenge sucks at times, we can take comfort in the fact that, hey, he promises to be with us. Like you were sharing, Cassie, like in those moments you actually encounter him in a different way. Because he says, I will be with you. If you let me, I'll be with you. I'm available. Will you allow me to come in? So that's certainty of storms. Absolutely monumental to having this perspective that of overcoming is there will be storms. What's my attitude towards that? Am I okay with that? Does that offend me? Am I not going to be a Christian now because there's hardships coming? What is it? Counting the cost. Big deal? Before we say with our mouth or attempt to live with our lives, we need to understand what we're agreeing to. What is the cost of Christianity? What are we saying yes to? What are we signing up for? All those phrases, that's counting the cost. Is looking at it and saying, before I make a decision to commit my life to Jesus or to commit my life to something, we're talking about Jesus Christianity. What is this cost? What is the expectation? What is he expecting of me now? What is he requiring of me now? What am I, we have visitors sign a campus living agreement form when they come to stay on our property. These are our expectations for visitors. This is what we are agreeing to stay here in our houses, and a lot of it has to do with your conduct of life, your speech, just real basic things, but there's an expectation there. So when we're coming to Jesus, has he laid out for us what his expectations are for a Christian? And sometimes we don't know that until we read it. till we get to know what the Bible says or what good teachers have to say about that expectation, about that standard. But the reality is there is a standard, and there is a cost that He's expecting. Are you willing to pay that cost? And good news or bad news, you decide, is that cost looks like your life. It's not a temporal thing. It's not I'll give you my next 5 minutes and then we're good for eternity. It's actually this decision to give my life to you, which looks like the rest of my days. And so you can put a big question mark on the rest of the days, but the main answer is my life is now yours.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Refuse Ordinary. We hope you were encouraged, inspired, and even challenged to seek more of who God is and who you are in Him. If you have any questions about the School of Transformation or would like to apply for our next semester, please go to transformationschool.org or send us an email at info@transformationschool.org. See you next time.